When working with the Octatrack, it's important to keep in mind that it was built for live performances. Imagine seeing your favorite electronic artist. The things that you'd expect to hear are breakdowns, build-ups, loud, quiet, loud dynamics, smooth transitions, all of those things to create a flow and maintain the audience's interest. A lot of the features on the Octatrack help you do the same things, so understanding that will allow you to make sense of the Octatrack even if you're not using it mainly for live performances. One of the cool performance features on the Octatrack are parts, which are a simple but powerful tool for adding variety and different sounds to your live sets and songs. So what are parts? To put it simply, parts are preset banks for your project sounds, whether that's your pool of samples on your flex tracks or your settings for through tracks and pickup machines. For those of you who are familiar with the analog 4 or rhythm, parts are the same thing as kits. Now let me break this down for you visually. In each project you have 4 pattern banks, A, B, C, and D, and within each bank you can have up to 4 parts. Now if we just look at one part, or one bank, let's say on part 1 you've got an 808 kit, bass, synth, vocal sample, and some sound effects. Now on part 2, now you've got a 909 kit and you're using 2 different through tracks for external synths and a neighbor track for each of those to add additional effects. And say on part 3, now you've just got a bunch of loops going on. And on part 4, you're exclusively using through tracks and neighbor tracks. Now, per part, you have 8 sounds. And per bank, you've got 4 parts. And you have 4 parts per project. So multiply that all together, and you have 128 different sounds that you could use in a single project. So when would you want to use parts? Let's say you're playing a 30-minute live set, and if you're only using one part, then you're limited to 8 different sounds. Sure, you have scenes and patterns, parameter logs, sample logs, and trig conditions to have variety in your song, but it's just going to start sounding like one long song because the core sounds are still the same. And there's only so many different scene changes and muting and unmuting you can do before all of that starts losing its effect and the crowd is going to start losing interest. The other option then is to change projects, but if you're playing 4 or 5 different songs and you're having to stop it each time to change projects and wait 10 seconds to load up a new project, then you've lost momentum and you've lost the crowd. So by chaining patterns and parts together, you can play a long, seamless set. So let me demonstrate this to you on the Octatrack. So here I'm on pattern A1 and I am currently on part 1. So that's how you select parts with this part button right here. Use the arrows to select which part you want. So on part 1, this is what we've got. And I'm just using 4 tracks, just to keep things simple. Track 8 is my master track. So let me just mute the other 3 tracks so we can hear what's going on each individual track one by one. On track 1, I've got this drum loop playing. Track 2, have this bass loop going on. Track 3, have this sitar sample. And on track 4, have this vocal loop playing. And in terms of this pattern, I have just one trigger selected on the first beat here for all of them, just to get the samples started, and they'll just loop for 2 bars. Now I'm gonna switch over to part 2 there, and once it reaches the end of that bar, it'll start part 2. So on this part, have a different drum sample playing on track 1. Have this trumpet on track 2. Have this flute thing going on track 3. And have the same vocal loop going for track 4 just to maintain some consistency. And it's still on pattern A1 with the triggers on the 1. Everything else is the same, it's just the tracks 1 through 3 are playing different samples. Now I'm going to switch over to part 3. I can switch around, go back to part 1, part 2, part 3. I don't have anything on part 4, so if I select that, it's just going to be silent because nothing has been selected for those tracks. Now, when working with parts, save them periodically so that if something happens, you don't lose everything that you've been working on. And how to do that is hit Function and Part, and you can go and save just that one part, save all for all the parts. And then if you hit Reload, say you were changing certain parts and certain samples, and then you didn't really like that. If you reload it, it'll recall the last saved setting. So that way you can, you won't lose everything and start over if you haven't been saving. And another word of advice when working with parts is to copy and paste parts. So if you're going to be working on part 4, the empty part, go ahead and copy an existing part, maybe part 3, and then paste it. Even if you are using completely different samples on each part, it's helpful to have something to work off of instead of starting from scratch. And to copy a part, just hit the part button, select the part that you want. Let's go to part 3, and then press Function and Copy. It says copy part 3. And then go to the part that you want to paste on, Function and Paste. It says paste on part 4. So now, if you press play, we're on part 4. It's the same thing as what we had on part 3. So we won't tell the difference because it's the same samples playing on both parts 3 and 4. So I just demonstrated changing parts within the same pattern. What you can also do with parts is link them to specific patterns. So right now I've got 3 parts and I've linked them to 3 different patterns. So let me just go through those 3 patterns just so that you can see. So we're on part 1, pattern 1 right now. And then I'm going to switch over to pattern 2. We'll switch over after this part. Now we're on pattern A2. We've linked that to part 2. And on this one, we've got different triggers, right? On pattern A1, we only had one trigger on the 1 right here, but on track 1, we've got a couple different triggers just to spice things up. Same thing with track 2, we have a few more triggers, track 3, even on this same vocal sample. Now let's switch over to pattern 3. To link the parts to the patterns is just select the pattern and then select the part that you want on that pattern. So let's go back to part 1 for this. So we've got pattern 3 linked to pattern 1. So if we play this, we're playing the same samples that we had on pattern 1, but they just sound different because there's different trigs on that pattern. So I hope this helped you understand parts and patterns and how to link them together to create variety and maintain interest in your sets or your live songs, whether you're playing them live or whether you're recording them in your home studio. Let me know what questions you have below, and thanks so much for checking this out. I'll see you guys next time.